So the title of this crazy video is My Encounter with the Mafia Boss Who Controlled the Secret Funds in a Church. Now I'm sure you don't look at your church like there's a mafia boss, but trust me, many churches have them. And I'm going to try to explain to you what happened to me so that it may give some insight to you in your particular church situation. So I was in a church in the year 2007, and it had a church portfolio, meaning stock investments, and that portfolio at that time was about $100,000. Now I've only served small churches, so I'm not sure if that sounds like a large amount or a small amount to you, but it was sufficient for the church. Now this is the church that suffered that 50% loss of the church portfolio. So in 2008, the aggressive stocks in that portfolio translated into about 50,000 rather than 100,000. So the church, in a sense, lost half of its value of its resources to support the financial health and structure of the church. Now the checking balance in 2007, the treasurer's report, always showed about $10,000 after bills were paid. In other words, that's your comfort in your general fund. Now in 2008, that kind of went down to about half, to about 5,000. So you can imagine at a board meeting or session meeting, always seeing that the balance remaining in the general fund was about $5,000 after bills were paid. Now in about 2009, there was a gaping hole in the parking lot, and that gaping hole needed a repair of about $5,000 or $6,000. So our elders, our session, voted to take the repairs out of a special fund, not in the general fund, called the Property Improvement Fund. Now that Property Improvement Fund was part of the portfolio, consisting now of about $50,000. So it was part of this and not the general fund. Okay? So what happened was that the church parking lot had a big gaping hole in it, needed repaired, and the repairs are going to be somewhere along the lines of $5,000, $6,000. So the motion to repair the parking lot out of the Property Improvement Fund passed unanimously. No negative votes. And it was to come out of the Property Improvement Fund, which was not part of the general fund. Now again, keep in mind that that was a stock fund. This gets a little complicated, I know. But it's the basis of my experience with all this stuff, and it seems to be fairly true in many, many churches. So suddenly now the treasurer's report at our meetings is showing a balance of about $100 after bills are paid. Now remember, previously the balance at one time when I started was $10,000, then it dropped down to about $5,000 or $6,000, and now all of a sudden there's only $100 in the general fund. So I called the treasurer and I said, "What's going on here?" Her name was Louise. I can use first names. No last names given. I said, "Louise, what's going on here?" She said, "Well, she was informed by Ed, and Ed's not even on the board, to pay the repairs of the parking lot out of the general fund. Now, I informed her that we voted, meaning the elders, the ruling body of the church voted to take it out of the property improvement fund. Now, what you have to understand is that Ed, his name is on that fund. Now, maybe you've not encountered this and you don't know too much about it. And hopefully I'm educating you. But these funds need the name or names of individuals from the church on the actual fund, so that when the church decides to cash in, there is one name, or several names perhaps, that will take care of that transaction. And no one else is authorized. Now, that's a secret. Let me say it again. No one else is authorized except the name that was given to them originally to oversee that fund. Now, do you understand the dilemma? That the church board voted to take it out of the special fund, the stock fund. And the man who was in charge of it refused to do it. Now, Ed, that was his name, wasn't even on board the leadership at the time, but he was an older gentleman in the community that everybody respected as a big leader. Ed said to the treasurer to take it out of the general fund. Now remember, the governing board said, no, take it out of the special property improvement fund. But Ed was the only one who could authorize redemption of that fund. In other words, he and he alone controlled that fund. No matter what the board said. He wasn't on the board of session, and yet he told the treasurer what to do. So, here we are. Our general fund is being depleted. It went down to a balance of maybe $25. And so I contacted Ed, and I said, Ed, the decision was, as you know, for this repair to come out of the property improvement fund, the stock fund. Now you need to cash that in and replace that money in the general fund. We're almost busted completely. So Ed basically balked and refused to take this transaction seriously, even though it was the board unanimously voted to take the money out of the Special Property Improvement Fund, which was a stock fund, and only Ed, and Ed alone, could redeem the stock fund. Now that's a dilemma you face with any of these things. There's one name, and one name alone, that rules over these funds. They're hidden, all right? Perhaps there could be two names or three, I don't know. And by the way, I don't think you know, and I don't think anyone else knows. Because it's all kept secret. Because it's a big amount of money. Big amount. So Ed and Ed alone had the power over the stock fund called Property Improvement Fund. And I didn't know what to do, and I thought, well, he's not working with me, so I asked the clerk of session, please work with Ed, instruct him to get that $5,000, it's $6,000 out of there, and put it back in the general fund, so when we have our treasurer's report, we won't see a balance of $25. So the clerk balked, him-hawed, and basically didn't get the job done. Now, I took him out to breakfast, and I pleaded with him to please work with Ed, because Ed's name and Ed alone could redeem these shares for us. I explained to him this terrible situation that the church basically was broke, because that's it. There was a balance of $25 in the general fund. Stay tuned, there's more. Here's what I did, and by the way, you can do this too. People on your board, your leadership won't like it. I don't know how far you would like to go with things, and how much you really care, and how much you really think you're going to direct the church, but I knew something had to be done. The clerk of session did not succeed. Ed is still refusing to redeem shares and replace the $5,000–$6,000. And the general fund is still down to maybe a balance of $25 each report. In other words, it's showing we're broke. So I thought, well, I think I know what to do. And good Lord gave me insight. And he said, invite the representative of the New Covenant funds to come to your meeting. Because after all, it is a church fund. It is not a private fund, by the way. It's not a private fund for one individual or two individuals or three to control. It is not a private fund. It is in the name of the church. So I invited the representative of these funds to come to our meeting. And I informed him of the problem we were having. And he said, it's simple. You just get other names on the signature cards. In other words, you get other people to be over the fund, and they can go and redeem the shares. Did you hear what I said? You get names on there that you can trust, who will carry out the will of the governing board. Now let me say it again, because I'm not sure I'm clear, and I know it's a little bit of a confusing situation, but the man was refusing to do what the governing board of the church instructed him to do. In other words, he was completely, totally defiant. Now this is why I called him the MAFIA boss. And once again, if you listen to my other videos, you have the people that are officially in charge. But then you have the unofficial people who are really in charge. That's why I called him the MAFIA boss. Now don't get me wrong, he was in church every Sunday. He had a name, he was respected, but he decided that he was in charge and not the governing board, not the session. So, how many names are on these cards for your funds? You probably don't know. And could the same happen to you? Sure. Because those names are the ones who are authorized. And if they refuse, you're stuck. You do understand now that I was in a small church, and you can't really continue to have a balance of $25 in your checking. So the end result was the money came back out of the property improvement fund. and was replaced in the general fund, so that now we would see balance of maybe $5,000–6,000 after each treasurer's report and all the bills were paid. But what did it take? I lost a lot of peace over it. I didn't want to take on someone who's a respected member of church life community, and he was. But I want to tell you this. The governing board made a decision, and that man refused to carry it out because he was in charge of that fund, not the church, not the governing board. Now, this is what you run into. The people that have been quiet, the people who have kept their mouths shut, the people who quietly control these things and don't say much to anybody about anything, they feel they are exclusively in charge. And what's the truth of the matter? The truth of the matter is, those funds were offerings to God. And God forbid that people try to take charge over them when they are under the headship of Jesus Christ. They are under the leadership of the governing board. And why all the secret elements of them, keeping their mouths shut, not telling people anything? The church needs to know the names of the funds. The church needs to see the results of these funds and what they're invested in. The church needs to know they can talk about them. They can pray over them. They can ask for God's guidance. So you can see I'm pretty passionate about this because this was a very, very strong, serious attack on the church. And it was through one man who was a respected man in the church, and yet he was a defiant, rebellious man who refused to do the will of the leaders, the church session. That's why I call him a mafia boss. Now, it was only by the grace of God, only by the gentleness of the Holy Spirit, that I was able to work through this. And I want you to know, it really wasn't me that brought the success. It was truly the work of God. And I want you to know that God can do the same for you in your situation, in your church. But I also want you to know that there will be stubborn people. And I also want you to know that these stubborn people are sinning in the eyes of God. And they are not obedient to God. Unfortunately, the pronouncement has to be made that when there's a lot of money involved, sinful things happen. And again, I want to remind you, they are not funds. They're not monies. They're offerings to God. And it's God and God alone who's in charge over every single penny, every single dollar. And if you want me to add to that, every single share of stock in your stock funds. God is in charge. So if somebody's blocking the way, you can get them out of the way by simply demanding and insisting that other names get on those signature cards, and that you bring the person in charge of those funds. This was the New Covenant funds in the Presbyterian Church, to come and give a report. What's in the fund? How's it doing? Etc., etc. That's my story, and the grace of God was with me. May the grace of God be with you as well. End of video.